Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I firstly thank you for inviting me to come along and talk to you this morning about procurement and engagement with SMEs, or small and medium enterprises, right across the UK. I'm with you this morning as the National Policy Chairman of the Federation of Small Businesses, and as some of you may or may not know, we are by far the largest business organisation in the UK, representing around 200,000 businesses across the whole range of SMEs, but primarily representing those businesses under 250 employees, but at the small and micro end, and of course those who are self-employed. Like all members, I also run a small business, which is a very long established manufacturing business based in the Midlands, and have developed a clear understanding of the opportunities as well as the challenges small businesses face when trying to engage in public sector procurement processes, as well as listening to the issues very clearly that our members raise. So what's the importance of small businesses? Who are these small businesses and what do they contribute to the economy? Well, together they make up 99.3% of all businesses across the UK. They contribute around 51%, that's just over half of total GDP. And they employ nearly 60% of the private sector workforce. So very clearly they make a huge contribution to the UK economy. The importance of public sector markets cannot be overestimated, as they are an important area for very many small businesses. However, the current public procurement process places small businesses at a clear disadvantage, and I shall illustrate why in a moment or two. Today we are at a critical juncture in terms of public procurement policy, and it goes without saying that small businesses do have a huge potential and capacity for growth. And I believe that by the intelligent and creative use of the huge public sector spending power, this can, and indeed should, play a role in stimulating and supporting that growth. Let me give you a recent snapshot from a survey of some 11,000 of our members. Firstly, though, the FSB of course regularly surveys our members, and this is critically important as they are carried out often in conjunction with outside bodies like CBR, who engage with us on our quarterly economic surveys, and they give an unrivaled insight into the small business perspective. 60% of members felt that there were barriers to small firms in bidding for public sector contracts. The tendering process is too long and it is certainly costly. And businesses are not always aware of the public sector contracts available. They do not feel often able to compete with larger suppliers, and the eligibility criteria often exclude them. For instance, as a recent issue from a member highlighted, that a public sector body was stipulating in their contract that they required a £100,000 bond to be put in place as part of that tendering process, simply to cover a £3,500 contract just for ordinary supplies. And these issues are particularly prominent among micro businesses, where they do not have the resources to enable them to comply with unwarranted requirements. Importantly, I do believe that procurers must realise that SME is a broad category, and that it is the small and micro end where the barriers really hit home. It is those small businesses with less than 50 employees, and in particular those at the micro end with less than 10, who face the biggest problems. The FSB recently undertook some major research into procurement at local government level. We chose local government as it is a very important sector for all of our members, and we surveyed every council in the UK. Just around a third, 148 local authorities, responded, and that was an excellent result. With average annual spend per council responding to the poll was estimated to be around about £185 million. So they do have a huge spending power. There were many positive findings, but over a third of councils thought there were no barriers to SMEs winning contracts, and many simply don't know how hard small businesses actually find it to do business with them. More than a third of councils do not actively record the location of the businesses they trade with, and almost a half didn't know the size of those businesses that they bought supplies or products from. So what are the solutions? Well, that research has helped us reach some conclusions about what was needed to improve things. It was focused on local government, but can be equally applied to the wider public sector. And the FSB would clearly like procurers to firstly look at measurement and transparency as being key, to put mechanisms in place to record and analyse where and indeed with which businesses money is spent. They should also measure the size of business by micro, small and medium. And that data should be transparent and publicly available. Secondly, make things simpler. Streamline and standardise the pre-qualification processes, including specific approaches for the lowest value contracts, and stop using disproportionate financial and insurance tender requirements. And thirdly, help businesses to ensure that they have initiatives to support small firms with the tender process and to develop the potential of their local small business supply base. Provide detailed, specific and timely feedback to all unsuccessful businesses so they are in a better place to help you and to bid in the future. And to break contracts into smaller lots where possible. Size can be a major barrier. And of course, use the Contracts Finder portal to advertise procurement opportunities. To achieve this, I believe that we need a cultural shift. Our surveys revealed a lack of understanding and engagement on both sides. Businesses need to better understand the process as well as the constraints. And procedures need to better understand small businesses and the benefits they can actually bring, the pressures they face, and of course how by using your local small business community you can indeed strengthen and support the local economies through regeneration, as it's been proven that every £1 spent locally produces approximately 70% of local spend, whereas by using large businesses, not only are the actual costs often increased, but that local spend does not happen. We understand, of course, that the localism agenda makes it challenging for the government to tell councils what and indeed how to do things. We have been working very closely with the LGA to try and achieve change by promoting best practice and working constructively with councils. However, we are interested to discuss what central government can do to move the agenda along. We believe that measuring, though, on your spend is vital, as it focuses minds, drives performance, and of course payment terms are a major issue for all small businesses. Most public authorities now try and look to adhere to fair payment terms, but of course the key problem comes with the prime contractor relationship, where the prime actually fails to pass on those payment terms and uses something much less favourable. For the prime contractor model, we believe that there should be a programme of increasingly centralised procurement of many goods and services, which of course in turn is leading towards larger contracts with fewer suppliers. And the use of prime contractors can work, but often provides problems for small businesses. For example, small businesses are unable to compete for those contracts. They're often squeezed by the main contractors on price, and they often don't seem to receive the same payment terms. They find it increasingly difficult to operate effectively, and procurers do need to make better use of their spending power to influence prime contractor behaviour. On frameworks, large central framework agreements, many of those are currently being promoted by government, but of course they can shut out the small business community. I believe that is risky. It results in a shrinking of the supplier diversity and indeed contraction in the marketplace. A thriving SME supplier market is good for both competition and indeed for innovation, for both purchaser and supplier. The FSB is realistic. We understand that aggregation and frameworks are indeed part of modern procurement, but the public sector must, we believe, manage it better. Trading with small businesses can indeed be a real benefit. They're often cheaper and with lower overheads. They deliver a high quality service. They are certainly more dedicated and give a personal approach, and they are easier for you to access senior management. Speed of service benefits, and they offer innovative and customised solutions. And certainly, I believe they offer better value when you aren't singularly looking at cost. There are wider benefits too. At the heart of their communities, the small business community is your community. They spend their money locally and they employ local people. They generate wealth, employment and opportunity right across those local communities that need those extra jobs going forwards. So in conclusion, think about the value of trading with small businesses and indeed trading locally. Think what it can do for your organisation and for the local economy. And I would like to thank you very much indeed for inviting me to just put a few of our points across this morning. I'm happy to take any questions.
Lovely, thank you. Right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, insight from the FSB into small businesses. Does anyone have any questions for Mike on how that engagement can be driven forward from the FSB's point of view? Lady Neal. In the middle? Yeah. In the middle there. No, it's coming down with the microphone.
I'm Catherine Moore from the University of Northern. We've been working with the Welsh Government for a number of years now on greater engagement of small businesses in public sector procurement in Wales. And in 2009 we published the Barriers to Procurement Opportunity report, which addressed a number of the things, the issues that you've raised this morning, in terms of advertising more widely, and getting better engagement between the public sector bodies and small businesses, providing support for them through the tendering process and so on. However, we're finding that there isn't a silver bullet. Many of the recommendations of that report have been now turned into government policy, particularly the standardisation of pre-qualification and so on. What we're finding is that in the current recessionary times and with government policy forcing the application agenda, it's becoming increasingly difficult to stay local. And one of the issues is that when we advertise contracts more widely to engage the small business community, we find that it's attracting interest from a wider geographical area, and some local businesses are actually losing out to businesses further afield. So do you have any comments on the local agenda particularly, and how you think public sector should be addressing the paradox between aggregation and supporting small businesses?
I think we've certainly raised the problem around aggregation with the central government. I do have engagement with Sally and the Cabinet Office on this particular issue. It's attractive, and yet it actually detracts from what everyone's wanting to do, and that is to try and use the small business community to offer better value. And I think the only thing that you can do is to try and make sure that you reach out to that small business community, make us aware of what your contracts are, where they are, help us with the tendering process, and make sure that any DQQs are not onerous. And if we can tackle that particular one so that it doesn't detract from small businesses applying. I think I've heard of a particular contract being a great big tome, and that's just not helpful because we simply don't have the resource. And when I say resource, it's not just cash, it's actual human resource and the time available. We all run small businesses, we get on with the work, and to try and fill in unwarranted tomes of paper that are actually meaningless at the end of the day for both parties is not worthwhile. So reach out to that small business community, make us aware of what's available, and I think certainly in Wales our team there are very heavily engaged with the Welsh Government Assembly.
Thank you, Mike. Any further questions? Gentlemen on the left.
Thank you. Alan Wilkinson, WPP Architects, and RIPA Suffolk branch. We're interested in how we can step up the pressure on local authorities to change. Because it seems to us that the change is actually for the worse. It's getting worse and much more difficult for small firms. Most architectural practices are very small, and just this week we had an example of a local authority pre-qualification for a £1.5 million scheme, construction value, which means that individually the consultants involved wouldn't over the threshold, but because they're aggregated and they want a multidisciplinary appointment, it goes over the threshold and becomes an urgency. The requirements, bearing in mind it's a 1.5 million construction cost, the requirements for 10 million professional indemnity insurance cover. There are very few architects, I think, in the country who have 10 million, certainly none in Suffolk. And there also now, we see a new thing arriving in this latest one, which is the requirement to provide Dun & Bradstreet failure report score of over 35. And if you get under 35, you're disqualified. Most of us didn't even know what a Dun & Bradstreet failure report score was. Did some research on the internet and managed to find that we all have a number, but these things are still happening. They've been happening for years, and it seems to us that it's actually getting worse. And there's a real urgency for small firms like ours, because the bread and butter work that we used to do is not accessible to us, and the cost to the local authorities, I suspect, is higher, because the only people who can make that bid are the bigger firms who might carry 10 million PII, and who might already have those good scores in the Dun & Bradstreet thing. So how can we step up the pressure? How can we make change happen more quickly?
Well, I think certainly that's where the FSB does come in. We do lobby all parts of government, as well as some of the credit scoring agencies. I had a meeting only earlier this week with BIPA, who is their body, and quite frankly, I'm sure that most of us in business actually don't even know what our credit score is. So there's a fundamental issue there. But I think it's totally unjustified, totally unwarranted to require a £10 million insurance cover when it isn't necessary. So I think also when you're looking at credit scoring, why does that come in? Why should that even be part of the PQQ or qualification requirements? What does it matter, as long as you may indeed have a track record of producing many years of excellent service to businesses and the public sector more widely? And I think it's these stupid, quite frankly, stupid requirements that professionals are bringing into the equation, because at the end of the day, it does actually damage what you're getting on the value for money score. It may be better on cost, but quite frankly, I think the margins will be higher when you're having these sort of problems brought into the equation. It does, as I said in my speech, stifle innovation, and it actually stops small businesses from being able to engage and deliver the quality of service that you probably would get better from them. So, you know, I sympathise. We are lobbying certainly on all of these issues, and we do repeatedly ask members with specific issues that we can bring forward and put directly to ministers.
Lovely, thanks, Mike. Any further? Gentleman in the middle. Thanks, Jack.
Good morning, Mike. I'm Scott Parker from Glamorgan Business School, and I work in conjunction with my colleague Catherine Wood. My, I suppose, statement or question really is, in Wales we have seen a number of success with our supply development service, which I know other parts of the country have been extremely jealous of, should we say. So the supply development service will go in and help small medium enterprises, and also meet the buyer events, etc. Kath and I support the supply development service in South East Wales and attend a number of these events. And the feedback we've had from that is that the supply development services so far has been very successful in helping with the order qualifying part of the procurement process. And the next stage really needs to be more of an emphasis on the order winning part of the process, how to make SMEs more competitive, full stop. And I wonder if yourselves have got any ideas, or are you putting this on your agenda to try and make SMEs more competitive? And is there any programs, etc., that you'll be running out in order to support that with partners?
Thank you, Scott. I'm not sure how we can make SMEs more competitive, because clearly that's not our role. It's up to the individual SMEs to make sure that they are competitive in the marketplace, offer good value for money, and that we get the message across that cost is never the be-all and the end-all. I know certainly our team, and I know the Welsh Government Assembly, are putting very heavy emphasis on engagement with small businesses at the moment, and I very much welcome that. I think the same also applies up in Scotland, where a very considerable percentage of the local government spend is actually spent with SMEs already. So there are lessons to be learned from our developed countries. And I think, you know, across England, there's that wider public sector base that really does need to get the message.
Thank you, Mike. Any further questions? Just the last one.
Hi, Katrina Adamczak from Argos for Business. We're seeing an ever-increasing trend of online procurement hubs popping up, where they're expecting people to pay a fee to join to see any of their contracts that are being advertised. From an outside view, this appears to go against the target increase in the percentage of contracts awarded to SMEs because of the fee imposed. What's your views?
I believe that all public sector contracts should be advertised free of charge, so all businesses can actually engage with the process and be able to get that business if they're competitive. It's as simple as that. Why should they be put out because there's a fee? Why should there in fact be a fee? It's in everyone's interest to make sure that wide business community gives you the value that you need on both sides at the end of the day, but it also comes back to using that small business community to actually give you that regeneration, support the local economy, support our local communities, and the small businesses are our local communities.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, one last question from Mike? Or are you going to let him go? Good. We've got a competition now. Gentleman there is first, I'm afraid.
Sorry, so it's a really short one. David Oakes from the Carers Federation. I actually, although I'm now working in business development, previously I was a commissioner, and I sort of having crossed the tracks, so to speak, I think one of the big issues is actually that commissioners and people who drive the process sometimes don't actually understand the costs that are carried by the individuals and people that bid for tenders and contracts, etc. So almost sort of twisting the professional liability point on their head, we've had contracts where we've invested significant time and resources that have never actually come to fruition. So maybe there should always be an onus on local governments to recognise those cost implications, and theoretically, so there's a liability on their side to cover the costs incurred.
I don't think I would dispute that to some point. I think though that you have got to balance the problem with the austerity and the cutbacks right across the public sector at the moment, with the added value that by engaging with the small business community that actually brings. So there's always a trade-off at the moment. You've heard earlier about the frameworks, we have problems around those. You've heard about aggregation, we've got problems around that. And you know, it's just a question of everybody working more closely together so we can attract as wide a base of businesses as possible to deliver the contracts that we want delivering on. Fairly simple, I'm afraid.
Be a nice thought if a cheque came with every bid pack. Be a new industry, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Mike very much for his input.